He kind of posed the challenge: if you had to recolonize your company on Mars and your rocket ship only fit 8 to 10 people, who would you put on it? Now go talk to those people and they'll tell you what values and what culture you already have that's already making you successful.
Welcome to the HR Like a Boss video series. If it resonates with you, please consider subscribing or sharing with a friend. In the description below, you'll find a social media link to listen to the complete podcast interview. Also, you can take the HR Like a Boss characteristics survey at www.willery.com/HRLAB. I've been blessed to be embarked on a journey to get to know amazingly awesome HR and business professionals. These conversations create the foundation for my book on what it takes to do HR like a boss. And on today's episode, I was super excited to be referred to Wendy Worthington. Wendy is the corporate HR director at SIFCO Industries, and I'm super happy to have her on today's show. Welcome, Wendy.
Thanks, John. Super happy to be here.
So Wendy, for those that don't know you, other than your corporate HR director role, maybe you could share a little bit about your background and what you're currently working on.
Sure. I have always been in HR, although I was an accidental HR employee. I was interviewing for a different position and they pulled me out and they said, hey, we think you might be better in HR. And I was in college and just wanted a job. So I said, okay. That's kind of where it all started. I started in a specialist role and then moved to generalist roles. I've had corporate roles and business unit roles. I've been in financial services and manufacturing. So I feel lucky to have had a lot of varied HR experiences.
That's awesome. I have to ask, what was that? Do you remember the job you were interviewing back when were you literally pulled out of a room and said, I think she might be a better candidate for HR? Was it, tell me about that.
Yeah, it was at the end of a day. So I was interviewing for a management training program in financial services. And they said, well, we really think you'd be better as a compensation analyst. So I ended up starting off in compensation.
So I like to get, other than getting to know you, I like to get things started at a very high level. So Wendy, in your years of experience, how would you describe the purpose of human resources?
To me, it's all about alignment, and it's all about connectivity. It's about aligning people with the business strategies and connecting them to the tools that they need to be successful in meeting those strategies. And it's also a lot about organizational culture more and more. And HR has a role in really helping the organization discover what that culture is and what our values are and how to use that culture and use those values to really drive success.
You know, that's great. I love that alignment and connectivity. Is there a particular challenge that you see maybe over your career of being able to create that alignment and connectivity between your employees, obviously, and then ultimately your employer?
You know, I think alignment with the employees and the business goals has gotten easier and easier. And I think it's something that most of the employees in the workforce understand and value now. You know, to me, the toughest thing is alignment around that culture. That's the piece that is just more elusive because it's much more, difficult to put your finger on a culture and on organizational values. So that's the piece that I think really requires a lot of work.
So how do you do that? So that's the barrier we have. So it's kind of maybe it's not a quantifiable thing. A culture is a living, breathing, part of your organization. Can you necessarily measure it one way or the other? I'm sure we probably could find a way to do that. But what kind of gets in your way of and how do you remove that barrier of the fact that culture can be an enigma and very dynamic?
Yeah. I mentioned to you before we got started on the recording that I appreciated some of the thought starters because it really got me thinking. And I was reminded of something I did probably 10 years ago, and it was 100% stolen. So I can take no credit for it. But we went through a process of defining our organizational values because we wanted to drive cultural change. And I was just doing some Googling and looking for best practices on this. And I ran across an article And this individual said, the biggest mistake you make is thinking that it's up to the leadership team in HR to define your values and your culture. And he said, instead, it's up to you to discover the values and the culture that already exist in your organization. And he kind of posed the challenge, if you had to recolonize your company on Mars and your rocket ship only fit 8 to 10 people, who would you put on it? Now go talk to those people and they'll tell you what values and what culture you already have that's already making you successful. And we did that. We identified these people and I facilitated some conversations with them. And then I took that to the leadership team and said, here are the values and here are the culture that our most valued employees see in the organization and want to see more. And now it's our job to bring that about. So that I think is, if you do it that way and say our employees really have these answers, this is not about the leadership team driving it, it's about the employees telling us how they want to be led. That really changes the discussion. And that for us has been so meaningful. We have it on our career section and our website. We talk about the fact that these are employee-driven values. We tell every new hire that story. And for some reason, that is really powerful and kind of getting them engaged in it right away when they hear that, oh, the employees at this company drove this.
I'm going to get you out of here on this last question, which ties into the book and the podcast and why I'm doing all this, to get together with super great people like yourself and share ideas with those that are listening in. So the book is called HR Like a Boss. The podcast is HR Like a Boss. So I'm curious, how would you describe someone that does HR like a boss?
Well, I'm going to start this the same way I started the first question. To me, it's all about alignment. HR has this very special role to connect the dots within the organization. And I think if you think about HR, you have this unique view. You almost have a bird's eye view, like you have a window looking out onto the entire organization, and you see how it's all working together. You see how people and process and technologies and organizational competence and culture and leadership and all of those things are working together to drive the results that you're seeing. But other people don't see that. It's not for any reason other than they just don't have the visibility that HR does. So HR needs to be just constantly talking about those connections. So if we're talking about the business result that we achieved, HR needs to be the one saying, and yeah, did everyone notice how so-and-so improved in this area to contribute to that? Or did everybody notice how these two teams collaborated to get there? Did everybody notice how we leveraged that new investment to get there? Because others, again, they just don't have the fortune of having this window out over the organization. And if HR can start connecting those dots, you just see light bulbs go on in people's head and they start to say, okay, now I do see that connection. So I'm going to make sure we have that connection again, because that connection really seemed to work. But to me, it's all about just aligning everything in the organization and helping people understand how it all fits together.
Yeah, that alignment and connectivity ends up driving business results, which then raises the value of HR because you're the one there kind of sometimes behind the scenes and in front of the scenes, making sure that those dots are being connected. So great point, Wendy. Appreciate you sharing that. And I wanted to sincerely thank you for being on today's show. You mentioned a few things that really stood out to me. Obviously, we talked about alignment and connecting the dots and connectivity, the importance of cultural identification for human resources. And you talked about a story 10 years or so ago about it was up to you to discover how that culture came about. And you and your leadership team figured out it was best to kind of dig into those valued employees that were really standing out from others to share the culture that existed and what they wanted to be going forward. And then you've used that to continue to commit to continuous improvement with employee-led events, with people raising their hand to want to do these things, which maybe you wouldn't have done if you hadn't taken that, getting that insight from that employee population. And two last things you mentioned, I love the failing forward, encouraging people to make mistakes. It's just one idea that we had that didn't quite work out. So let's not try to do that again. And to ask as many questions as you possibly can at any point in your career, especially when you're new, and creating that safe place for others to be able to do that. So thank you, Wendy. It was really insightful. I appreciate you being on.
Thanks. I appreciate you having me.
And to all of you listening, thank you for checking out today's episode. I hope that you enjoyed it. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share with a friend. And until next time, let's continue to aspire to do amazingly awesome HR.